All right, it's time to assemble our track together and put the train on it and make it drive. So the first thing we're going to do is open up a new file. It's not a part file this time, it's going to be an assembly. So we'll go ahead and open that assembly, which hopefully won't take too long. There we go. All right, and I'm going to go to Place. And there was a part that I made that you're going to have to make right now. So I'll go ahead and bring it in. I called it QB. And QB is just a little 1-inch cube. It's a 1 by 1 by 1 inch cube. So 1 for the height, 1 for the width, 1 for the depth. And it's got a 1/4-inch hole that goes right through the middle of it. So you're going to have to make that. I didn't think I needed to make the video for it at this point because that should be a pretty simple design for you. So go ahead and make a part file and call it QB. And you can see I just called it QB, C-U-B-I-E. And we're going to need to bring QB out. So go ahead and make that, save it, then open the assembly and bring QB in. Okay, once you've got QB in there, then we only need one QB. Then we're going to go place the curved track that you've already made. And the curved track should look something like that. And I'm going to right click and say OK. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and I'm going to ground this first piece of track I've got. So I'm going to left click on it so it's blue, it's highlighted, and I can see it's highlighted over here. And I'm just going to right click on it now, and I'm going to go down to grounded. And so now it can't move. It is stuck. And you can see there's a pin through it, a little thumbtack. And I'm going to take that track and I'm going to pattern it. So you see pattern up here. And the component I want to pattern is the track. And we're going to do that with a circular pattern. And I'm going to pick one of the arcs on here. And what it does is when I pick one of these circular arcs, it identifies the center point, which is right out here. You can see that. So I'm just going to say, go ahead. And that's the circular pattern. And I want to have 8 occurrences because it's a 45-degree section of track. And I want 8 of them. And they're going to appear every 45 degrees, I think is what they want. Here, let's go ahead. I don't know that it selected a component yet. There they are. Okay, so now you can see I've got 8 pieces of track that are going to come together every 45 degrees, forming a full track. And I'll hit OK. Now, I want QB to be right in the middle of this thing. So I'm going to go to Constraint, and I'm going to do an Insert. And I'm going to pick that top circle of QB. And just one of these edges, maybe that top edge, it doesn't matter which piece you pick because they all have that same center point right there in the middle. And I'm going to click on that and QB is going to get locked right in the middle. Now it flipped it so QB is a little high and it doesn't matter, that's totally fine. But I'm going to go ahead and just say aligned and it'll keep it a little bit lower. I'm going to say apply. So now I've got QB locked right in the middle. So the track does not move because it's grounded. If I grab it and try to move it, it doesn't do anything. QB does move. I can spin QB around. And I'm going to use that to get my train to drive on this track here in just a couple minutes. Okay, so let's go ahead and bring in our train. So I'm going to go back to Place. And I've got my assembled train. It's down at the bottom here. Train assembly. And it's my train with no smokestack on it. So... and there he is. Okay, and I only need one, so I'll hit OK. Now I need to take this train and I need to put it on the track. What I'm going to do here in just a minute, I'm going to go to where it says Component Pattern. That is my track. So if I hit the plus, I can see all 8 elements. Those are my 8 pieces of track. Okay, and I just want to hide one of them. So I'm going to right click on that first one right there. And what I want to do is hide its visibility, which I'm not seeing the option to do. Let's try the second one. Give me that option. Yeah, okay, there we go. I don't know why I didn't. The first one, it was my original, so maybe it didn't give me that option. I'm just going to go to right click on it and say suppress. And that's now hiding that piece of track. It still exists, and I will just unsuppress it in a minute to bring it back. Okay, so let's go ahead and put this train on the track. So I'm going to look at the underneath part of the train, and I'm going to do a constraint, and I'm going to do a mate. Okay, the way it works in Inventor, you've got mates, and either your mate is facing each other, it's either opposed or it's aligned, and that is a mate and a flush, but they're both listed under mate right here. So what I'm really going to do, this one is this mate right here where they're opposed. I'm going to tell the bottom of the train, and I'm going to look back now at the top of the track, and the top of this track, I want them to be together, but I don't really want them to be perfectly together because the wheels are too deep. So I'm going to offset it 0.35 inches, so 35/100 of an inch, and that raises it up a little bit because of that offset. I'll go ahead and hit OK. So now my train is slightly offset above the track. And now I'm going to do a couple more constraints. I'm going to go ahead and tell this train, I'm going to tell the front of the train to be flush with the front of this cube right here. Okay, but I want it to actually be centered. So if you remember, if I'm going to get this thing centered on the track, I don't want the front to be perfectly flush with this. If you remember, this train is 5.5 inches long. It was the very first thing you made on the train. I told it to be 5.5 inches long, so I'm actually going to offset it 2.75 inches, and it went the wrong way, right? So I'll make it a negative 2.75 inches. But that's from this side of the cube. And remember, QB's got an inch to himself, so I'm actually going to subtract off 1/2 inch to get this thing perfectly centered. So I'm really only going to take it back negative 2.25 inches. Hopefully that made some sense, but what that did is it's centered QB, kind of perfectly centered in this train. So I'm going to hit apply to that too. And I'm going to do one more. I'm going to do a mate again. And I'm going to tell QB to be mated to the side of this linkage arm right here. So now they are locked together. Well, I don't really want my train right there, so I'm going to look at it from the top, and I'm going to play around with the offset for this. So I've mated them so that they are side by side, but then I'm going to go over here, and if you remember when we made the track, we made that arc, or the line that we revolved the track around, something like 15 inches away. So let's put in 15 inches and see how that looks. Okay, so that's it, offset 15 inches. And if you notice, it's a little too far. The wheels are still off the track. So let's bring it back to 14.5 inches. How does that look? That's pretty darn good. Okay, and if you want to make it even better, you're welcome to keep playing with it and see if you can find something even closer than 14.5 inches. But that'll certainly be close enough to serve the purpose we need. So I'm going to hit apply. And at this point, our train is fully constrained to the track and QB. So now if I grab QB and I spin QB around, our train is spinning. Okay? So that's how we're going to drive this train. We're really just going to be driving QB. And nobody's going to know about it. Okay, so we're going to go back to constraint. And we're going to do an angle constraint this time. And again, it's going to be directed angle like we've done before. And I'm going to tell QB, the side of QB right here, to be 0 degrees. You can see the angle is 0 degrees with this face right here, and that locks them so they're parallel at 0 degrees. And I'm going to hit apply, and really what that means is they are parallel. Okay, now QB can't spin anymore because I've locked him to this track. But what I can do is I can go back over to my track that I suppressed earlier, and I can right click and I can unsuppress it. So my track comes back. I can no longer spin QB because he's attached. But I'm going to go ahead and hit the plus next to QB. And I can see all the constraints I've put on. I inserted it to the track, and I mated it and flushed it with the train. But then I put that angle constraint on to that piece of the track. Now what I can do is I can do what's called driving the constraint, which means forcing it to change. So I can go right here to drive. And I can tell it to go from 0 degrees, which I just told it to be at. Let's tell it to go 720 degrees. And that is going to now make QB spin. Now if you notice, he's going the opposite direction that I wanted him to, so maybe I'll throw in a negative 720 degrees and say go. And now he's going the direction I did want him to go. Okay, so I am driving QB. And because my train is constrained to QB, the train's going along with it. Okay. Next step, we'll go ahead and close that. And I'm going to go to QB. I'm going to say, well, we don't really want people to know how I'm driving this train, so I'm just going to right click on QB and get rid of his visibility. He still exists and I can still drive him, but I didn't want people to see how I was making that happen. What would be really nice is that we could get these wheels to actually spin. But if you notice, I brought an assembly into another assembly. That makes it a sub-assembly, which means it's got rigid components that don't move. So I'm going to right click on train assembly, and I'm going to go down and select flexible. And what that does, you get these little blue piston things. And what that means is now my components of my train can move again. They are now flexible again. Okay, so they can move. And that's good. But if I drive the train, it's still, the wheels will not move. They'll move a little bit, but they're not going to move the way I want them to move. I have to force that to happen. So I'm going to go to constraint. And I'm going to do what's called a motion constraint. And we've got two options. We've got rotation and we've got rotation translation. Rotation translation means one thing is spinning while something else is moving straight. Now when we're driving on the straight track, that's what we'll use. But we're not driving on a straight track, we're driving on a curved track. So we're going to use rotation and basically say, okay, the wheels are going to spin while the train is going around the track. And we're going to have to set up a ratio and basically say how many times should the wheels spin per time around the track. So let's go ahead and click on this wheel. And let's go ahead and click on the inside of this track. And if you were to do the calculation of the circumference of that wheel and compare it to the circumference of the track, you get a ratio of something like 1 to 17. So I'm going to put in 17 here. Now I may have to take the reciprocal of that. I might actually have to turn it into 1/17, but we'll try it out. So we'll hit apply. So it's going to rotate with a ratio of 17. So either we will get 17 wheel spins per one trip around the track, or it's going to take 17 trips around the track for the wheel to spin one time. And it'll be obvious real quick. So I'm going to go to that angle constraint and go back to drive. And it's got my negative 720 in there still, and that's good. So I'm going to hit play. And you're looking at it and you're like, it's not doing anything. The reality is it is actually doing something, but it's just doing it really slowly. And if you were to look at it really carefully, you'll see it's actually doing the moonwalk. The wheels are spinning ever so slightly backwards. So they're going the wrong direction and they're going at the wrong rate. So we need the reciprocal and we need to switch the direction of the rotation. So I'm going to go ahead and close the drive constraint. And we're going to go find, under this train assembly down at the very bottom, you'll find that rotation constraint we put in. I'm going to right click on it and go to edit. And we don't want it doing the moonwalk, so instead of them spinning the same rotational direction, we want them to switch. And we don't want it to take 17 times. We want it to do a rotation every 17th of the way around the track. So I'll say OK. And now I should be able to go back to my angle constraint on QB and drive that. And let's get a better view of this whole thing. And now if we say go, the wheels are spinning and it's driving around the track. So there is the train driving on the circular track. When you get it done, let me know.
Carlos Bedard, please come to the attention.